Hello, everybody. Hi, I'm Jax James, the state policy manager for NORML, and I'm back. If you guys were on yesterday, you probably saw that I had an update regarding ballot initiative and referendum efforts across the country. And I said, don't worry, I'll still be back for Friday's state updates. So here we are today. We're going to be talking about legislative items today. So there are several ways that you can change laws across the country. Some states allow for ballot initiative, which is where voters can collect signatures and petition to have something put on the ballot. There's also referendum, which is a legislative-driven initiative where a legislator will offer for something to be added to the ballot. It'll pass through the legislature. It'll then go to the voters to decide and come back to the legislature to build out with statutes, etc. And then there are other states that only have the legislative process to go through. So if you guys have been watching me recently, you know that I am with Texas NORML. And in Texas, we have the legislative process to change our state laws here in Texas. So while Texas is not in a legislative session right now, there are many states across the country that are. So today I'm going to be talking about some moving legislation that is going on and giving y'all some updates on that. I will come back and forth from the comments to answer any questions that you guys might have. And please know that just because I don't mention your state today doesn't mean that there isn't perhaps some legislation that is moving there. Of course, as I mentioned, these are just things that have of high priority that have advanced over the last week, because I like to come here every week and tell y'all what is going on across the country. So on that note, let's go ahead and kick it off. Let me scroll over to my notepad here. So if you guys are watching live right now, you can see in the description that there is a link to the blog today. Today, we're going to be talking about some important legalization advancements in Maryland, medical cannabis advancement in South Carolina, and then other important changes and movements that's happening in Delaware, Illinois, California, lots of states to discuss today. I'm going to be going A to Z through the list today. So at the top of the list is California. So, you know, I love to see where you guys are watching from. Please do take a moment to drop that in the comments, and I will double check at the end to see if there's any actions in your area that I can update you on. So California, 25 years after the passage of Prop 215, California still has many regions that lack medicinal cannabis access because of these enactment of local bans on licensed providers. And in some areas have in some areas, patients have to travel hours to get to their closest dispensary. So there is legislation in the Senate Bill 1186, which looks to remedy this situation by requiring all local governments to provide avenues to patients to access either via an establishment of licensed dispensaries or by delivery services. And the update on this legislation is that it continues to advance through the committee process in California, and its next hearing is set for April 21st. So if you live in California, there is a link there for you to email your legislators in support of this legislation. Now, in California, there's also legislation in the House, AB 1690. It's actually an anti-tobacco bill, but it has been amended to also include cannabis items. So it's an anti-tobacco bill that would ban single-use vape pens, and the amendment would also ban single-use cannabis vape pens. The update on this is that the legislation has advanced to the next stage in the committee process and is on the move. So if you're in California, make sure that you take a moment to oppose the provision in that bill banning single-use cannabis vapes. While we can discuss, perhaps some of the waste created by those and being thoughtful about that, we definitely do not want to be limiting access for patients or other consumers. All right, let's talk about Delaware. Anyone from Delaware today? I don't see anyone yet. Ooh, Denmark, though. You're right, it's not America, but I love that you're watching. All right, so Delaware, you guys have probably been watching that the legislature had HB 305, which was a full comprehensive legalization bill, but they failed to advance that legislation by just 2 votes. So the author, Rep. Ed Osienski, I apologize if I don't say your name right, has filed new legislation to legalize the adult use of cannabis. So he's treating these as a pair of bills, even though they are not companion bills. It's kind of like a 1-2 plan that he's got. And so there's House Bill 371, which legalizes the possession of cannabis for those 21 and up. It removes all criminal penalties for the possession of up to 1 ounce, and possession over an ounce or the public consumption of marijuana would still be classified as a misdemeanor. An important caveat is that this legislation will also allow for adults to transfer cannabis amongst them within the possession limits. So that is a great item there. Send a message to your legislator if you're in Delaware to support that. The part 2 of the 1-2 punch is House Bill 372, called the Delaware Marijuana Control Act. And this would establish a regulated adult use cannabis market in the state. It would tax and regulate cannabis products similar to alcohol products. So there is a link there to take action to support that. Now, updates on both of these bills. On April 13th, House Bill 371 will be heard in the House Health and Human Development Committee at 11 a.m. And on the very same day, April 13th, House Bill 372 will be heard in the House Revenue and Finance Committee at 1 p.m. So a busy day in Delaware on the 13th. So if you are in Delaware, make sure that you tune into that important moving legislation. Now on to Illinois, where current Illinois law requires that individuals petitioning for either expungement or sealing of their records, they have to pass a 30-day drug test prior to filing their petition. So in Illinois, House Bill 4392 would remove this drug test requirement. So HB 4392 has been in the Criminal Law Committee and has had a hearing held on the 5th, and it was voted out of committee and now advances to the Senate floor. Now, in Louisiana, Senate Bill 221 reconsiders criminal sentencing for those who have been convicted with marijuana possession of 14 grams or less. And this bill was scheduled for a hearing on the 5th of April and is pending a vote. Additionally, House Bill 137 provides reciprocity for qualified patients from other states who visit Louisiana. This bill was heard on the 6th in the House Committee on Administration of Criminal Justice and is also pending a vote. Now, the next item of legislation is legislation that NORML does oppose, and it's House Bill 700. And this wants to impose a new criminal penalty for the possession of cannabis by individuals under 18 years of age. Young people shouldn't be saddled with a criminal record and lifelong penalties. So, of course, this is something that we oppose. This bill has passed out of committee and advanced for the House floor for discussion on Tuesday, April 5th, where it was amended and returned to the calendar. So definitely keep your eye on that. Additionally, new legislation was filed, House Bill 988, that offers employment protections for patients who lawfully consume medical cannabis while away from their jobs. The provision doesn't alter existing law regarding consumption at work, which is strictly prohibited. So some legislation that's advancing, some legislation we oppose, and new legislation in Louisiana. Please go and click on the blog so you can participate in those action alerts. I'm going to come over the comments real quick and see if you guys have anything about what we've been discussing so far. All right, welcome friends from Kentucky, Mississippi, Ohio, New Mexico, Illinois, Pennsylvania. Love it. Mississippi, California, Iowa. Awesome. I don't see any questions yet, but thank y'all so much for dropping that in there. I'll come back over once I finish with this update and circle back on any questions that y'all might have. So let's talk about Maryland. Lawmakers gave final approval to a proposed constitutional amendment, House Bill 1, which will ask the voters, do you favor the legalization of adult use cannabis in the state of Maryland? So voters will decide on the issue in November. Of course, recent polling shows that anywhere between 62 and 70% of Marylanders support this. And if it is approved by the voters, the referendum will take effect on July 1st. State lawmakers are also working on approving complementary legislation, HB 837, which defines the limits, facilitates for automatic review and expunsion of past criminal records, and basically outlines kind of the skeleton of what the statutory and regulatory framework would be. This bill has passed the House and the Senate and waits approval by the Republican Governor Larry Hogan. So if you live in Maryland, please make sure that you send a message to your governor to sign this effort. Now, it is of note that lawmakers will still need to enact additional legislation next session to finalize these rules and regulations that would govern this cannabis marketplace in Maryland. So big props to all of the people that NORML has been working with in Maryland. There is a great coalition going on not only in Delaware, but also in Maryland. So I just wanted to toot the coalition's horn there for a second. Also in New Hampshire House Bill 629 permits adults 21 and up to legally possess up to 3/4 of an ounce of cannabis, 5 grams of hashish, and to grow 6 marijuana plants, 3 mature, 3 immature. Of course, statewide polling continues to show that New Hampshire adults support legalizing the possession of small amounts of marijuana for recreational use, 68% of New Hampshire adults, in fact. And the update is that the Senate Judiciary Committee held a public hearing on Thursday of this week, and this legislation is still pending a vote. So if you live in New Hampshire, click our blog and make sure you engage in that link there. Now, let's talk about New York City. Well, it's the state of New York, but I always think of New York City when I say New York. I'm sure people in New York don't appreciate that. Sorry. But in New York, Senate Bill S 8738-A, that's an easy bill number, also known as the Cannabis Community Reinvestment Act, provides new requirements for cannabis operators to allocate a portion of their profits towards local community reinvestment plans. The bill would require that new applicants submitted by cannabis operators include plans to reinvest in the communities that have been disproportionately impacted by cannabis prohibition, prioritizing the communities in which the operator is located in if possible. So there is a link to support this equity legislation in New York. Now moving on to Pennsylvania, talking about some banking legislation. Senate Bill 1167 seeks to legitimize banking practices for medical cannabis businesses and address the lack of insurance options for medical patients who rely on cannabis. It allows for state tax deductions of business expenses and permits state credit unions to interact with cannabis businesses. The bill's provisions also allow insurers to lawfully work with cannabis businesses, and it would significantly benefit patients who currently have no options for insurance coverage for their medical cannabis products. So the update here is that the Pennsylvania State Banking and Insurance Committee unanimously passed the bipartisan banking legislation, and it is now advancing to the Senate floor. Just 2 more updates for you guys here before I come back to the comments. In South Carolina, S-150, known as the South Carolina Compassionate Care Act, would qualify patients to use, purchase, and possess medical cannabis with a patient's recommendation. Of course, it passed the Senate a few weeks ago, and the members of the House Medical, Military, and Municipal Affairs Committee, that is a mouthful, had a hearing on Thursday where they finally moved to advance the bill to the House floor. So that is the next step in South Carolina. We encourage you to reach out to your representatives there. And then one note from Washington, D.C. So on Tuesday, April 5th, D.C. council members vetoed emergency legislation proposed by Council Member Phil Mendelson that aimed to effectively end the gray market cannabis gifting economy formed by the enactment of Initiative 71 back in 2015. This emergency legislation is intended, or was intended, to allow the district as well as landlords of brick and mortar stores that host them to close down any and all I-71 cannabis gifting businesses. Adults 21 and over would instead be allowed to purchase cannabis from existing medical dispensaries in DC by self-certifying that they would personally benefit from medical cannabis, ending the need for any physician recommendation. This bill at the council level, city council level, did fail to pass by one vote. So an update for those of y'all that are in the nation's capital. Okay, coming back to the comments. All right, so let's see. I believe that someone was asking about Kansas. There is legislation in Kansas that passed the Senate and is making its way through the House. Kansas takes an April break where legislators take a 3-week break to go back to their districts and get input from their constituents on legislation. And then they come back April 25th for a veto session. So the hope is that they will address that medical cannabis bill on April 25th. So there is currently a call to action in Kentucky for you to reach out, or I'm sorry, Kansas, for you to reach out to your legislator so that they know how you stand on that policy there, and so that they can come back and vote yes, hopefully. All right, let's talk about, I talked about Illinois, I talked about Pennsylvania, that's great. Let's see. I think I saw someone asking about Tennessee. Let's see what's up in Tennessee. Coming over to my handy dandy spreadsheet that runs my life. There is a medical bill that is currently still moving in Tennessee, and it did have a hearing recently. So please, if you are in Tennessee, I encourage you to go to normal.org/act. You have a dynamic map there, and you can hover over your state, and it'll show you any legislation that we have current action alerts on. So definitely participate there. Jay wants to know what's up with Texas. All right, Jay, let me tell you what's up with Texas. We have a 2-year cycle in Texas, and right now we're in the election part of our cycle. So there are some primary runoffs that will be happening in May, and there are some key offices that are going off into runoff. So I encourage everyone to go out and vote, and then we'll have our general election in November. Just 6 days after the general election, our newly elected legislators will be able to pre-file legislation here in Texas. And then our legislative cycle will start on January. It's usually like around January 12th. I don't have the exact date, but mid-January of 2023. So right now in this interim session, or interim time, it's extremely important to reach out to any incumbents that you have in your districts, engage with any candidates that you are interested in, and of course go to texasnormal.org so that you can take a look at our voters guide. So whenever you're engaging in those primary runoffs, you know how the candidates stand on those issues. All right. Someone from NORML, New York. Nice to see you. All right, let's see. I'm just scrolling, guys, just scrolling, making sure I don't miss any questions about states. I'm seeing some federal questions about what's going on, and I will let you know that on Wednesday of this week, through our Texas NORML April virtual meeting, I held a live stream with Morgan Fox, who is the political director for NORML, and we talked about the MORE Act. We talked about the research bill that passed, a different one passed from the House, then passed from the Senate. We also talked about Schumer's bill that's coming up. So I encourage you to take a look at that live stream, check it out on either our YouTube, our Facebook, our Twitter, and then also, going back to federal things, if you go to normal.org/act, at the very top are all of our federal actions. So I really encourage you guys to go to normal.org/act. When in doubt, go to normal.org/act. You'll have federal actions. You can hover over your state and see if there's any moving legislation. That will always be the answer. All right, let's see. Any other questions? I don't see any other questions, guys. So I'm going to close it with thank you so much for tuning in today. Of course, I did a ballot initiative live stream yesterday if you want to go back and check that out. And today we covered state legislative advancements. So click that blog link if you missed anything that I chatted about. All of the action alert links are going to be hyperlinked there for you. Also, I know you guys are following NORML and you probably appreciate our mission and the work that we do for cannabis consumers. And so I encourage you to click the link to join NORML and become a member. You can also click the other link to donate. You can choose to become a monthly donor, a one-time donor. And so I encourage you to do that. And lastly, if you want to be more engaged in your state, you can check out our chapters page and make sure that you are engaged with the chapter nearest you. Now, if there's not a chapter in your state, we would love to get one started. There's not many states that don't have chapters, but there are a few. And so if you are interested in doing that, of course, JM and chapter development would love to connect with you. So I still don't see any new questions. And so I'm going to sign off for today with you guys. We're heading into the weekend. It is a gorgeous day here in Texas. It's not hot yet. The bluebonnets are popping. And I hope that where you're at, you're also enjoying a beautiful day too. So next Friday, I will be back to chat more about what happens in the next week and give you guys another update. And until then, I bid you adieu, and I hope you all have an amazing weekend. So take care, friends.